Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., thanks for joining us. How would you describe the summit going on today in the Negev Desert?
Well, it's a very strange summit. On one hand, you have Israel meeting with the foreign ministers of Arab countries to discuss ways in which together we can meet the threat of Iran, which is now backed by the United States in the form of the Iran nuclear deal, the renewed Iran nuclear deal. On the other hand, you have the Secretary of State of the United States coming to show solidarity with the very same Middle Eastern countries that the United States is about to betray by renewing that deal. So that's a very strange summit. If you look behind the scenes, I think you're going to see it's a little bit more nuanced, and that is that Israel and the Arab states, the members of the Abraham Accords plus Egypt, are saying to the United States, we know you're committed to renewing this awful deal, but if you're committed, how are you willing to compensate us, to strengthen the Middle Eastern defenses that have been so impaired by this deal? Secretary of State Blinken, on the other hand, is saying, yes, we're committed to making this deal for our own reasons. And yes, we are willing to compensate you by giving you capabilities and understandings that would then shore up the defense of your countries.
Well, Michael, could that be contradictory? On the one hand, you're putting Israel in harm's way with this Iranian nuclear deal, as well as the other Sunni Arab nations. And then on the other hand, you're coming to say, we're going to protect you.
Yep. Yes, it is. But welcome to the world of diplomacy, where nothing is entirely black and white. And I think that I get the sense that the Israeli government, which hasn't put up a very, very stiff fight against this agreement, a fight, but not a stiff one, nothing compared to what Benjamin Netanyahu did in fighting the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, has basically internalized that there's nothing they can do to stop it. The Biden administration is determined to go ahead with it. And therefore, the emphasis has been on the ways in which the United States can compensate Israel and its new Arab allies. This is an approach, also that Netanyahu took back in 2015 in the aftermath of the Iran nuclear deal. I prepared a paper for him on ways in which the United States could compensate Israel, both in terms of understandings. For example, what constituted a violation by Iran? Is it one isotope, two isotopes? And also capabilities. Israel, has a wonderful Air Force, world-class Air Force. We do not have strategic bombers. We only have fighter planes. And having a strategic bomber would send a very strong message to Iran as well. Obama rejected all of those offers, but rejected. Let's see if President Biden will be open to suggestions such as those.
Michael, how would you describe the Iranian nuclear deal as we understand it right now?
Worse than 2015. And the administration will say it is worse because Donald Trump left us with a bad hand. That's what they're going to say. This is the best we can do. And the fact of it is the Iranians managed to get pretty much everything they want. What they're going to do is get from what I understand, they'll get a nuclear program that will enable them to retain their nuclear infrastructure, to keep advanced centrifuges, to develop further advanced centrifuges, to continue to develop intercontinental ballistic delivery systems. It will probably say nothing about the development of warheads. And we know about the material that our agents smuggled out of Tehran in 2018. We know that the Iranians are continuing to work on a warhead. None of that. So basically, this will buy some time, maybe at most 4 years, on one part of the Iranian nuclear program, which is the enrichment program. And after those 4 years, Iran will be in the position to enrich enough uranium for hundreds of bombs. And in the meanwhile, Iran will get tens and perhaps hundreds of billions of dollars in sanctions relief and business deals, particularly now with tremendous demand for cheap oil in the world, hundreds of billions of dollars. And that money Iran is not going to use for schools and houses. It's going to use for more missiles to aim at the state of Israel, more terror, more efforts to undermine pro-American governments in the Middle East. So we're going to be on a clock. We're going to be clocking, and the clock's going to be ticking. I am certain, Chris, that this deal will put Israel in the Middle East on the path to a regional conflict.
Michael, that's a very strong statement. Why do you say that? Is it because Israel will have no other chance but to go ahead and attack Iran's nuclear facilities?
Well, I'm going to leave that decision to our decision makers. But here's how it works. Iran is going to be surrounding Israel with tens of thousands of rockets. There's probably 150,000 in the hands of Hezbollah alone. Many of them now are guided missiles, for which we have very limited defense. And the timing will be this. The idea is to surround Israel with enough missiles so that when Iran does break out to create a nuclear weapon, and Israel tries to prevent it, we'll be hit, we'll be pummeled from all sides and deterred. And I believe that the Iranians are trying to make all of these components fit at the same time, whether it be enrichment, missile development, ballistic missile development, and warhead development. It'll all come together. And Israel will have to make a decision whether we're going to sit back and let this happen, which would be disastrous, or whether we're going to have to act first. But either way, whether we move first or the Iranians move first, it's going to be a regional conflict. And the Iranians, keep in mind, we have to assume that the Iranian regime is committed to this country's destruction. It's not just rhetoric. Last night, I watched pictures from Tehran, the crowds chanting "Death to America, death to Israel," and also "Cursed be the Jews." Cursed be the Jews. This is in a regime that is about to get hundreds of billions of dollars in Western finance. Cursed be the Jews. They're serious about destroying this place.
Well, Michael, do you see these Sunni Arab nations coming together, as well as Saudi Arabia in the background? Do you see this as sort of one glimmer of hope, at least presenting a united front against Iran during this Negev summit?
It is, but some of these countries are already negotiating with Tehran. They're trying to hedge their bets. And they're in a somewhat different situation for us. Iran wants to bring down their governments, but doesn't want to wipe them off the map. Israel is the only target of Iran where Iran really wants to wipe us off the map. It's a genocidal program, which Israel, with our particular history, we have to take very, very seriously. And I believe that the Iranians will try to wipe us off the map eventually.
Well, right now we see a very complicated situation in the region. How is the war between Ukraine and Russia affecting the region?
Well, it's affecting Israel. It's affecting the situation with the Iranian nuclear deal. I'm certain that Putin opened his notebook and took notes on America's treatment of the Iran issue, that America was willing to remove sanctions, that America was willing to take a military option off the table, to do almost everything possible to get this deal. And that was a barometer for Mr. Putin in trying to assess America's staying power, its willingness to resist. The Ukraine war, though, has also created a situation where the Biden administration doesn't want to create a wholesale impression that it's abandoning allies. And Putin had also took note of which the United States was going to abandon its Middle Eastern allies to reach this agreement, and probably made conclusions about America's willingness to stand up against Russia's invasion. I think that Secretary of State Blinken is here to sort of try to reverse to whatever degree he can that impression, show that the United States, in spite of the Iranian deal, is willing to stand by its allies.
Well, Michael, you served there as Israel's ambassador to the U.S. during the Obama years. How would you explain the U.S. idea of actually going ahead with this Iranian nuclear deal, both then and now?
Well, during the Obama years, there were three legs to the JCPOA, to the Iran nuclear deal. One was the assumption that if Iran was engaged with respect and with incentives, monetary incentives, that Iran could become, quote unquote, a responsible regional power. The second assumption was that Iran would then delay its nuclear program. You could kick the sort of the can down the road for a while. And I think there was also the notion that the Iranians were rational, that that the Iran nuclear deal would block the path of Iran to a nuclear weapon. Now, of those assumptions, only one of them remains for the Biden administration. The Biden administration doesn't say that the Iran nuclear deal will block Iran's path to the bomb. They know it won't. They know it will delay it at most. They know that Iran is not going to be a responsible regional power. They know that. That's what this summit is about. Basically, Blinken is saying that we're going to sign this deal, and Iran's still going to remain a horrible problem. The only assumption that remains is the ability to kick the can down the road. This administration wants to focus on the Ukraine. It wants to focus on the Far East. It doesn't want to deal with the Middle East. Let's kick the can down the road a couple of years and let another administration deal with it. And then that's the only reason. Beyond that, it's internal domestic politics, Chris. Within the Democratic Party, particularly the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, the Iran nuclear deal of 2015 has become kind of a religion, kind of a faith. Nobody even knows what's in it. But to be a Democrat, you've got to check the box. I support the JCPOA, and that is what we've seen. I think that for domestic political reasons, the administration has to be perceived as pursuing this, even at a great political cost, because I believe it will actually cost this administration in terms of its midterm elections next November.
Well, final question, Michael. How would you describe to an American audience right now what is going on in the region?
In the region, everything's in flux. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. Yes, this is an historic victory for the state of Israel. It's of huge significance, Chris, that this summit is being taken place at Staple Care. I lived there for many years. It was the seat of Ben Gurion's home. It's actually the site of Ben Gurion's gravesite. There's some talk that these Arab leaders would visit that gravesite. This is the father of the state of Israel, our founding father, our first prime minister. That Arab leaders be gathered around that gravesite is an event of just enormous historical significance. The fact that they're coming here to be with us, they're recognizing that Israel is not just here, but Israel is a regional power, and is an allied regional power. We're an essential ally for these Arab states. It's quite an extraordinary moment. At the same time, with all the complexities of the Iran nuclear deal and American support for that deal.
Well, Ambassador Michael Oren, thanks for your time. Appreciate your expertise and analysis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris.